Hello and welcome to #DigLead Book Club, a live stream series that pairs nicely with my new book, Digital Leadership in Higher Education. My name is Josie Alquist. I am the small but mighty author behind the book that came out in September. And I created this series as a way to bring the book to life, whether you have it that you're reading along or not, that you can meet some individuals featured in the book and to have timely conversations about what's happening in higher education as well as out into the interwebs. We are streaming live right now on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on Facebook. And if you are joining us, especially live, I would love to know who you are, where you're logging in from. I am logging in from Los Angeles with this is my holiday-esque sweater that I have. This is I guess as holiday-ish as I go. So I thought this would be a good one to throw on because this is the final live stream for 2020. And I am still sorting out what 2021 has in store. Aren't we all? And I will keep you all posted about what this series transforms into next. But again, this one will be wrapping us up for the year. Another announcement that I'm excited to share is I finally reached out to my publisher to ask for an update on book sales. I kind of enjoyed just being a little in the dark about how it was going because I just wanted to assume it was going well. I do know overall in all industries, book sales during the pandemic have gone down. So either way, I found out that we have sold 606 books. And I am thrilled with that. So if you're one of those people who have gotten the book in any version it comes in, thank you so very much. And think about gifting it out there, out into the world. But this won't be an infomercial, I swear, for the book. Again, the goal is to bring the book to life and meet some of the really cool people that I got to feature in the text. And so today, I am excited to have on one of those features, Melissa Wu. She is the Executive Vice President for Administration and Chief Information Officer at Michigan State University. So, Melissa, welcome on to this show.
Oh, thank you so much, Josie, and thank you so much for inviting me. I loved your book. I loved it enough that I gave away the copy that you sent to me to our head of IT strategic relations and bought myself an electronic copy. So that's how much I loved it.
Oh, that's great. Yes, gifting is encouraged. And yeah, just to be able to have a digital copy is also quite handy. So we've interacted obviously online. I originally invited you onto my podcast a few years ago, which we'll talk about because
That was a while ago.
We feel like we're probably living in different times since then. But as we think about what you have learned about yourself since March, this is a very reflective time of year. Is there anything coming to mind for yourself or your work in higher education that you've learned about yourself?
It's not so much about myself, but I think that I've learned something about people, and it's amazing the capacity that my coworkers have had for providing grace to other people. I mean, we're in a very challenging time and people are stressed out, but it's just amazing how much people have just been sort of letting people do their thing, providing that, like I said, that grace to people and understanding that everyone is going through challenging times. And it's been really fun seeing people's pets and kids and partners like wandering in and out of video conferences. I never thought I'd enjoy that sort of thing. I love it. I actually think I've learned more about people than I would have if I'd stayed in the office, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, it's literally taken us out of our boundaries into our homes and humanizing, especially very public leaders like yourself. What are you seeing throughout higher ed and IT that things that you think we have learned since March?
I think think what we've learned is that we're not as place-based as we always thought we were going to be. I remember in multiple campuses arguing that IT had to physically be in the heart of campus because we couldn't lose, actually physically being there. And although there are some aspects of IT that still do need to be there, so for example, a service desk might need to be there just in order to serve students, most of us don't have to do this. Most of us actually can work remotely, at least part-time, if not permanently remotely. I think that's something that we've all learned in higher ed. And part of it is that if you're at a place-based institution, which is what many of us are at, I think that translates over to support side as well. We all think we have to be place-based as well. I think this has taught us all something totally different.
Right. Yeah, and I caught your interview on the new normal, very similar to this show, but on YouTube and LinkedIn with a Tambelli group with Rachel, and you talked about the CIO plus, which and the future of work, and I really appreciated this positive and possibilities perspective that you had about working from home, including the benefit where you are located in Michigan, to be able to increase diversity of recruiting candidates that maybe that sell to get them to move to Michigan. This is another angle of that. And there was a number other of things that you shared on that kind of show and podcast, but I just kind of wanted to reflect that back to you about thinking about the way that we work and what the new normal is.
Well, I think having part of the workforce be on permanent remote, actually, like you said, could increase our ability to recruit diverse staff who don't want to move to East Lansing, Michigan, quite frankly. So I'm hailing from Okemos, which is near East Lansing. And it's actually a very nice community, but you have to actually be able to stand Michigan winter, which was something I thought really hard about because I'd spent so much time in the Midwest already. Well, this might provide us flexibility to recruit people from different parts of the country who don't want to move here, and hopefully more diverse in terms of different qualities than what we might be able to recruit here. So there's that. I mean, there's other reasons why permanent remote work can be a real positive, and we might be able to provide better flex time for people, which on the employer side can mean that we can extend the services that we provide over a larger number of hours, while on the employee side we can provide more flex time for people who are caring for aged parents or children or have other portions of their lives where they can literally not do 9 to 5. And so I think there's some real benefits there, and there's no commute. Or, well, the commute is for me, from the bedroom to the kitchen, and the kitchen's part of our great room. So that's not much of a commute. So, I mean, I can see that has advantages for people as well, because they're not spending an hour to 2 hours commuting somewhere. Not that commute's like that here, by the way, because it's not. But I mean, in the winter, I think that's very useful. So you don't have to commute in the snow. Yeah. It also is good from an environmental standpoint because we don't have as many cars on the road, which would be great. So there are a lot of pluses. I understand there's a lot of cons too, but there are a lot of pros we can look at as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, out here in Los Angeles, like 10 miles may not seem long, but on the 405, 10 miles in traffic could be significant part of someone's day. Another element of that interview that really jumped out to me was this concept and practice that tech is not separate. It is integration. It is also fluid and not separate. And I definitely connect with that practice and that belief that it doesn't fit in different boxes. It is life in 2021 and 2020, and even before that. How do you see your role I could see that you are continually trying to be an educator throughout your campus about how we need to be fluid, that it's not a separate element, as well as throughout the field. How have you found in order to really encourage this integration and not separation mentality?
Well, a lot of it is exactly what you said. It's not talking about technology as it's a separate thing. So if there's one statement that drives me crazy is something the CIOs used to say all the time, which is to say, how can IT be a better partner to the business? And I just would rip my hair out because IT is part of the business. It's not a partner to the business. Oh, stop. What's funny is earlier today I was having a discussion with our chief information security officer, and the word cyber, and there was that trend for a while about how we did everything. Well, that's sort of dropping off because guess what? Everything is electronic now. So everything is stupid. And so I expect that this putting cyber in front of everything will probably disappear too, because everything is dependent on some level of technology, even if positions or roles are entirely in the physical world that don't themselves use some kind of technology. There's something at the back end that's somehow tracking time or tracking schedules or something. So it is a part of life, period. And so I'm really hoping that we stop seeing the this, that, and cyber this and cyber that. And it's socializing that it is part of everything we do, and in fact can make our functions and our workflows more effective and more efficient. Just stop thinking about it as this alien, weird bolt-on thing, because it's not. It is part of what we do.
Yeah, I got really ornery in the spring in student affairs, student engagement. The word virtual was being used, and I felt like, what are we like back in the 90s? Like, when do we know what virtual like? But I guess people are trying to signal like what it is that's different. But like you said, I hope we can just remove some of that language because it just is the work.
Exactly. Yeah. And the virtual thing, we're not going to get rid of the word virtual quite yet, I don't think. But I think I'd almost rather switch to on-site or on-premise versus off-site or something like that. And there's probably better words than that. But virtual is kind of silly because, getting to your point, it's like, what are we talking about, Second Life or something?
Right. And we, especially in student affairs, you are serving young adults who also have seen that, like, oh, am I going to experience some kind of experience, I guess one could say. Well, talking about throwbacks, I had you on the podcast a few years ago. We talked about blockchain and Google Plus, and I know our rest in peace, Google Plus, you were such a huge fan of it because of the community building that happened amongst other CIOs. So where have you found since Google Plus, you spending a lot of time to still build community with that community? And then I'm also curious your interest and higher ed's use of blockchain, what that's looking like now today.
I unfortunately haven't really found a good substitute for Google Plus, because now most of the communities are more intentional. So, we have Slack channels with colleagues, but that's intentional. People are invited, as opposed to people joining a community and then finding where they fit, which groups they have an affinity for. I literally haven't found anything. Facebook, I've discussed that before. Facebook is, for me, all the personal stuff, so I don't let work intrude into that to the extent that I can. So that's not a place, and it's Facebook, and maybe I won't say anymore. And so there really hasn't been a good substitute for, I think, some of just the serendipity of Google Plus. It's like stumbling into a Google Plus group full of educators and saying, hi, I'm not one of you, but I really want to learn from you. I just happen to find you, It's just not happening. And I'm open to someone suggesting possible alternatives. I just haven't found one yet. Yeah. As far as blockchain goes, it still hasn't, I don't think it's lived up to the promise of what everyone was saying. I think it still could be useful, but it's sort of one of those things where maybe we haven't had the time to invest and really take a look at the appropriate uses of it. I think blockchain or blockchain-like technologies, which is a different thing, could be useful for things such as, maintaining lists or connections with former students, tracking an entire student through the student life cycle from the time that they're just maybe looking at your campus through the time that they become an alum. The possibility for utilizing something like a blockchain for that student to actually maintain all of their educational records independent of where they actually got their certs or, whatever it is.
Right.
Promises there, we just haven't actually really done anything with it yet. I think because it was overhyped.
Interesting. Well, I thought I would ask for a status update. It's fun to talk about where some of those technologies have gone. And so, as someone that was featured in the book, I asked everyone at least the same question once: is what is your why for leading specifically online? And your answer including online as a medium provides opportunities for reaching a broader audience that might not have other access to higher education. If you can give us a little bit more insight into your why.
Well, I think that pretty much says it all. I mean, it really does have a broad reach now. I mean, I think back to the old days of Usenet news groups and whatnot, where we had a very narrow scope of people who actually were able to jump on. Well, now, I mean, I'm not saying that everyone has access, because there is still differential access based on income and accessibility. So we still have that challenge to conquer. But there is a broader audience that you can reach to really help socialize the value of higher ed, which has been so important over these last few years. Is that I think that the American public has in many ways lost or has the understanding for what the value of higher education is. And a lot of the value to me, honestly, for leading online is not just to lead, but it's to learn from other leaders. I mean, I've learned a lot from just the different conversations I've had in social media, because none of us knows everything and we can always be better. And so, I mean, those are the reasons that I maintain such a high level of online presence.
Wonderful. Well, where I get to talk about your example is in a section of the book called Your Meaningful Content, because I get asked by leaders a lot, I just don't know what to post next, or I feel like I'm just giving information and promotions, and that is part a little about social media. We use it as a vehicle to communicate. But I've also found if we go too heavy on that lens, then we just become bulletin boards. And I found over time, kind of keeping an eye on you, and especially during COVID, your consistency to keep connected with your community on different platforms is a great example to share. So, for example, on Twitter, you have been sharing like good morning messages to your community. You specifically tag like tech at MSU, and then you ask a question, or you might reflect on something with you and your partner, or the snow or something, to get interaction. So I really want folks to get tactical ideas and feedback too, as they think about, okay, I want to be consistent, but I also want to be strategic. So I like to share examples so then individuals can hear the rationale and maybe an example of what's happened because of that strategy. So if you could give us just a little insight into that.
Well, I think that, I mean, it's a two-way street. I mean, as you were just pointing out, if you just do a lot of one-way posts, I mean, of just information that you're just pushing, I mean, it's a little like standing in an potentially empty room and just yelling. I mean, that's not useful without the interactions. And so I hope I spend at least as much time reacting to other people's posts and trying to engage people in, 280 character dialogues, because that's the value. Is it also helps you, I think it helps you establish your personality online is in the questions you ask other people or in the way you react to other people. I mean, the morning thing came because of COVID-19, is that I felt some need with all the doom and gloom and whatnot to just say, good morning, every morning, and make some observation or ask a question, as you're pointing out. And I'm pretty sure I'm not engaging a huge number of people there. I don't think our central IT organization really pays much attention to my tweets, but it's really funny is that people outside of our central IT organization do appear to be doing so. And, it's just my way of at least trying to inject something that's positive every day during this time that people are really, really stressed and challenged at where we are right now and what we're all living through. I mean, in just terms of what to post, is that you have to understand your own true north. I mean, what's your personal voice? That's why I don't like I understand why people have ghostwriters for Twitter and whatnot. Well, if you're important enough, yeah, you do that, right? Because you don't have the time. But is that really your true voice, your true self? And I think some of it is just deciding, for this particular social media avenue, in this case, Twitter, I'm going to mostly focus on this part of me because we all have parts of ourselves, right? And so for me, it's focusing on things such as leadership, IT. I'm trying to move a little away from IT because although I'm still CIO, I actually have a bigger job now. So I might actually kind of be there along with those people who don't know how to find their voice, because actually now I need to find a different voice because I now represent different areas within higher ed. Probably will still engage in IT because I still hold the title of CIO, but it's an interesting issue, I think, but it is really just understanding your true self and always sticking to your true self that matters.
I appreciate that reflection. Self-awareness has come up a lot in these conversations and is a core of the book. That's why I call it leadership, is really having an understanding about how we do show up in these different spaces with purpose, but also that it's going to change over time. Like you said, now navigating potentially a new voice and a new strategy. So mentorship is another value of yours. That's another component of digital leadership is knowing and living out your values. And both in our podcast episode as well as in the book, we talked about a Twitter chat called CIO Chat. And I know you're, again, moving in lots of different directions in higher ed, but how is this chat? What has it provided to you? And as a leader in some of these chats, is there a specific lens that you take on, or overall lens within social media and mentorship?
I think in the context of CIO Chat, CIO Chat attracts IT professionals from different verticals. And so I do tend to take a very higher ed type focus there because not everyone there is representing higher ed. And we are a little different in some ways, though I might reasonably argue we're more like other verticals than we like to think we are. So, I mean, that's the lens I try to take. And honestly, the value to me in CIO Chat is I'm learning a lot from other people. I mean, the private sector, it tends to be a little ahead, actually a lot ahead of higher ed. And it's fascinating to me to actually learn what many of these private sector companies are already doing, because we'll be lagging 5 years behind, but it's good to know what they're doing and learn, I think, a different viewpoint on how people address different leadership challenges in IT, because often we'll talk about staff and the different challenges with staff, which are pretty much universal across verticals. And it's interesting to see the different approaches and different philosophies that people take, which can be 180 degrees different than mine. And that doesn't mean either of us is wrong. It's just, it helps, I think, expand my horizons. It helps sort of broaden, my view on things. And it makes me question sometimes, okay, so I've just seen how this person does it. Maybe I should start incorporating some of that, because that sounds like it would be really effective. I mean, so it helps me ask that question of myself often.
Mm. The perspective or the value of bringing in outside industries is so valuable. Some other pockets of campus do tend to keep things so insular. So that's a great example. Thinking more about mentorship in the pandemic and how that looks like now, have you tried out or offered or just kind of seen your role as a mentor or mentorship evolving now, or looking different in COVID, or what you feel like you do need to contribute? Because we've talked about in the podcast and what I've heard on other interviews, like wanting to lift up women, people of color, especially within the IT industry, and how we're able to carry that out now.
What's really funny is things haven't changed that much, because any mentoring I was doing was almost always not in person anyway, because it's generally always been people who have not been at the same institution as me.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I think that the flavor around mentoring right now during the pandemic has taken an additional dimension, and that is caring for other people. So in addition to the professional care, I think a lot of people just want to be talking to someone. I mean, and I think for those people who are in mentoring situations is making sure to leave space for that. because I think everyone really, it's just like everyone wants to reach out now. They want to just talk. And it doesn't have to be about anything specific, but just talk because they need the human connection. So that
Mm-hmm.
might be the only difference. Now, that said, during the pandemic, we do know that the research, or at least the initial research, shows that this is disadvantaging women and people of color in certain races. So I would say it's maybe more important than ever to be providing mentorship and just support during this time, because we know that there are populations that have been hit particularly hard.
Right. Well, I think Liz Gross recommended that I connect with you, have you on the podcast, who is another big proponent of mentorship. And I have found, and I found you right away, despite your title, to be very approachable in how you use social media. I mean, one can get that just from a LinkedIn profile or what they do on Twitter. And I do think sometimes you can say, I want to be a mentor, like I'm here for you, but like that can be received differently. So has there been anything that you have done for those that are watching and listening to think about, how do I make myself a little bit more approachable, even though I have maybe kind of an intimidating title in practice as well as like in my bio, in order to serve in mentorship capacities?
Well, I mean, some of it is maybe not being so formal. I mean, I'm freely admit that my LinkedIn bio is probably a little on the formal side, but my Twitter one might be a little less so. I'm trying to remember if I still left in the bit about how I over communicate in my Twitter bio. That actually comes from a former boss of mine who actually told me to my face that I'm an over communicator. So I sort of took it as a joke and I stuck it in my Twitter bio for a long time. I just don't remember if I left it there or not. Some of it is actually sharing a piece of yourself like that, which isn't too over the top. I mean,
Right.
I think it's amusing, but it's not completely unprofessional. And so hopefully that sort of takes the edge off of the fancy title and all the other formal pieces that describe what I do.
Right. Yeah, it can be just a simple little add-on to your bio or something that you share. I think I had a previous supervisor maybe refer to me as a bulldog, so I don't know if I'm gonna add that to my Twitter bio, but I got stuff done. We'll say that.
You could always say a former boss said, I get stuff done, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Absolutely. Well, as we look to 2021, again, this tends to be a reflective and celebratory time, as well as thinking, okay, we're going into this next new year. What's on your mind right now? What are your hopes for higher ed and other CIOs or just other leaders right now, especially related to tech and social media?
I really, honestly, this isn't really a social media thing, but I really am looking at permanent remote work because I think it would provide a lot more flexibility, not just for employees, but it opens up a lot of opportunity for our universities as well. I mean, we could be freeing up space that could be better utilized for teaching, learning, research, or other functions that are more relevant to the mission or more directly relevant. I'm not saying that we're irrelevant, but we don't necessarily need to be physically in the spaces. So I think that does open up lots of opportunities there. But that does mean then we are focusing more on the tools and services that we need in order to make sure that we maintain that human contact and communications. I think this is a huge shift. And what was interesting is that I was in a conference with a number of CIOs where there was a lot of focus on tools that could be used for permanent remote work. And I said, can we step back a little bit, especially since I am the step back a little bit right now mode, and stop coming to the leadership table as the IT leader and come to the leadership table as a university leader whose area of expertise just happens to be IT. Think of it differently. Don't talk about tools to start with. Talk about the benefits. Talk about, what challenges we have. For example, in a lot of higher ed institutions where I've been, we've managed by time warming a seat, which is not the way to manage whether you're in person or not in person. And I think for a lot of us, this is a complete retraining of our management layer to
Right.
understand how to do this based on productivity and performance rather than how long someone warms a seat. So that's really what we bring to the table. And then the tools come afterward. Speaking with my tech leader hat on, is and I would say this to basically any of the sub-disciplines of higher ed, whether you're a student affairs leader or whatever, think about not coming to the table as the specialty leader. Come
Mm.
as the university leader who happens to oversee this area. And hopefully that helps people shift into a more, I think, systems thinking view. Think of the university or college first. Then you can advise from your area of expertise. I mean, these are things I'm thinking about, especially now that IT is sort of front and center in everyone's mind. And, and we've all been praised for how well IT, helped everyone with the shift and all that. Well, now's the time then to take advantage of that attention and make sure that you're not framed as an IT leader, but that you're framed as a leader.
Mm.
The other challenge is, how do we then ride this after the pandemic is over? Because easily for any of our support units that has really stepped up to the plate, and it's not just IT, we could easily be forgotten as the people that did this great job after everything's over, right? And so how do we keep making sure that we're still seen as a strategic part of the higher ed business? So those are kind of the multiple things that are going through my mind right now. And a lot of it is just connecting everything else with IT, because of what I oversee is that some permanent remote work affects HR, it affects facilities, it affects sustainability, and about to pick up purchasing and stores and that sort of thing, which also may matter going forward, depending on how we assist people who are going to be working from home. I mean, what do we purchase as a university for them? What do we not? So that's a lot of little details, but I think these are the things that matter for their experience as employees.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what we all need to focus on, is experience.
Mm. Well, I think another word that I saw used, I think it was one of the speakers of EDUCAUSE. I just caught like maybe a tweet or two, the word evolve. As we think about ourselves as leaders, and you've shared both macro, big picture, as well as some of those micro components to think about as we move into 2021.
I agree. I mean, I think I hate to use a new paradigm because that is so banal, but I mean, in many ways, thinking about a different way to work, but at the same time, continuing to support our on-premise students, because most of us have them, is in a new paradigm. Sorry, I really shouldn't. It's a new way of thinking. How's that? Oh, there we go. It's a completely different frame of reference. And what can we do? What makes the most sense for the organizations we work for? And what's most effective and most efficient, while still providing value?
Right. Yeah, staying true to the purpose, the value. Don't get all caught up in the tools or what division that your position exists in. Having that holistic perspective. I really appreciate that.
I like that experience. I was talking to someone about this the other day, where at one of the campuses at which I've worked, and it's been 5, so I'm not taking any one of them, just looking at student-facing services. I mean, literally, and I mean those of us who work in higher ed, often shape what we do in our workflows based on something that's convenient to us, not the people we serve. And so literally one of the campuses on which I was on, the different student support offices were sort of like in different parts of campus. And so I was trying to imagine what it was like to be a new student, trying to get their lives together in an entirely new environment, probably the first time away from their families, and they don't know the physical layout of the campus. And you could say that there's also a non-physical analog to that, is like searching multiple websites to get everything you want.
Right.
Because we've structured things that are convenient to us as the people who are working, not thinking about how people experience it. And it's not just students. Having now been onboarded at 5 different universities, I can tell you as a new employee, it's not so great either. Going between multiple offices to get like your ID card and your parking pass, and then just, really? And the same could go not just for new people. I was just talking about this concept to someone today. Let's think about someone who has to move offices on a college campus. Okay, so you've got facilities involved, you probably have IT involved, you've got HR involved. but they're all like these separate transactions. Where
Mm-hmm.
in an ideal world, if you looked at experience, basically there would be like one request: we need to move this person from here to here. That person should not have to know all these different areas to be tracking. I mean, they don't need to. They should not have to be the project manager of their own move, or whoever's representing them should not be the project manager of that move. I mean, it's the stupidest thing ever. It's a terrible experience. Yeah, I've been through this more than once.
This is explaining why more is being added to your portfolio, Melissa. I think is the way that your brain works.
Now I need to shut up on that,
Nah.
don't I?
Well, the efficiency is speaking to my heart. I completely appreciate that. But also the perspective taking is I see this from how we set up our websites to how we write and post on social media to bigger decisions is that we're speaking either to the community we want to have and or just to ourselves in our own lens. And I will also call out this institution. I went to undergrad there though. And when I asked at orientation, it seemed like kind of a question like that. They're like, no, this is just how it is. This is what you should experience as a student to like do this whole, because there was like an icebreaker to teach you how to basically deal with the bureaucracy of an institution. I was like, I don't know. But
You're just bringing me back to my undergrad days, where this is really before huge amounts of automation and scheduling your classes. But literally, we had to visit every department where we wanted to take a course and pick up a punch card. And so if all of a sudden you realize that the punch cards for the time that you wanted a certain class had run out, that meant you were running back all the way to every one of the old departments to see if you could pick up another punch card for another time so you could take the classes you wanted. That is the true example of units only doing things for their own convenience and not thinking about the experience.
yeah. And like a dance card. Like, was there used to be dance cards or you sign up for you're gonna I never experienced that. Well, I guess that makes me think of in leadership, you have this view, you this openness, evolve, efficiency, but I'm pretty positive you worked with some people that don't see life and work that way. So, how, especially right now, would you encourage leaders to supervise, train, or even mentor those that maybe are having a harder time with the rate of change or looking at things differently? As again, I think you and I might kind of be flourishing right now in these new ways of doing and being, but we also know higher ed has really got its feet, its claws caught into some cogs. So I'd be interested in your perspective.
I mean, some of it is, I mean, someone has to be willing to be mentored that way or taught. I mean, you can't force education on someone. But I think some of it is to start on talking about what the advantages are of being more progressive in one's thinking. And if you can get a foot in the door that resonates with that person, and it's going to be very individualized on what resonates with different people, I think you can go from there. And it's just you know encouraging people to think differently and what to motivate the people who are actually doing the mentoring. I mean, for me, some of it is just the satisfaction of knowing that you've helped someone. The other, I think some of it, and a lot of what I write on, is the idea of paying it forward, is that so many people helped me as I was going through my career and continue to do so, by the way. It doesn't really stop no matter what position you're in. Is I feel an obligation to pay it forward as thanks to those people, even if they never know that I'm thanking them that way. I mean, that's part of my ethos. If anybody wants motivation, it's either pay it forward or simply self-satisfaction that you've helped someone else.
Right. Yeah. Well, I also heard the skill of being coachable as we evolve our careers right now, and we've even seen, especially maybe like some entry level or mid level professionals in different areas across campus being helping out or being transitioned to other parts of campus based upon the need for service delivery. So, especially for IT, if someone's listening right now and has never really thought about pivoting maybe into any kind of that area, what advice might you have for them as you think about career opportunities in IT in the higher ed going forward?
I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and they're not all like these high techy, nerdy So, I mean, that's the real problem we have with IT in attracting, I think, a more diverse cadre of people, is that it's not all sitting behind a monitor. That we're all doing it right now. Let's be frank. But it's not all sitting behind a monitor typing out code. And in fact, that's just one part of IT, and it's not even a major part. I mean, although it's important, somebody's got to do it. There are a lot of other areas of IT, particularly in higher ed. I mean, you could get involved with the technology around education, where the focus is really on education, not the technology. So that's one area. I mean, there's a huge need in most cases for project managers. Well, that's not you sitting behind a screen typing programming code and being a nerd. I mean, there's service management, which is, should not be a relatively new thing, but it is relatively new in higher ed. It's in like the last 10 years or so. I mean, there are a lot of areas of IT that are not nerdy. I mean, I don't know how many times I can say that, but the problem is that's the impression we all get from the media, is that it's only nerds with no social life who go into IT, and I can tell you that's not the case. And for purely selfish reasons, I want more interesting people to work with. I want people that actually have real lives and aren't spending all of their time working on IT stuff because it's not interesting to be with. I mean, I want people with real lives, people that can talk about, cooking or biking or something. So I would encourage people to look at it because there's so much opportunity in the technology space, especially since technology is now part of life.
Right.
So it's an interesting question. At what point do we stop calling it IT? Because it's just going to be embedded in everything.
Right. Well, I appreciate you sharing that not all positions in that area require coding or technology, like building skills, and that you're also looking for the same things a lot of areas are, that you want whole people with interests and abilities to manage. So I appreciate that.
Well, I push back on a lot of these job descriptions that say that someone has to have a degree in computer science. I mean, it gets really infuriating if it's somewhere in the leadership realm. I mean, I'm a little notorious for writing back to search firms that send me something where it says that a CIO has to have a bachelor's degree in computer science or equivalent or whatever. Yeah, I usually write back to the search consultant. I say, I realize this isn't you, because I'm sure you know better. I'm sure but you have to satisfy your client. So I'm about to give you a statement about why this is wrong-headed, so that if you need to talk to your client, that you have a statement about why it makes no sense to focus on someone with a bachelor's degree in computer science for an IT leadership role. You don't need it, for one thing. And actually, on a maybe more serious note, from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint, at least in the United States, we know that there are fewer women and people of color who have bachelor's degrees in computer science. So what you're immediately doing is you are basically creating an entirely homogenous pool. And it doesn't matter if you say CS or equivalent, because people see the CS.
Right.
And I mean, I don't have a degree in CS, so I'm doing stuff, and I haven't quite failed yet.
Yeah, that same mentality can be in student affairs, which is my background, from entry level all the way up to vice presidency. So, yeah, pushing back on that. I appreciate those emails that you send to search firms.
I know it's not for, it's their client, and that's why I say here. So I'm going to give you a statement. You can share it with your client if you want. You
Just mentorship everywhere.
Well, I mean, for me, it's an interest in making sure we diversify the field itself, and that does not help us.
Right. Yeah. That intention and purpose is always so clear with you, Melissa, which I appreciate so very much. I want to thank you for jumping on today. I really enjoyed our conversation. This was such a great way to end this series for 2020, and just your overall support of the book, and the work that I do. And obviously, I'm just such a big fan and supporter of yours.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and I may actually gift some props to our campus communications folks as well. So they might increase that number of full books.
That's that's awesome. Love it.
So
All right,
much.
Melissa, happy holidays, and hopefully we'll connect very soon.
You too. Thank you so much.
All right, well, that rounds us out. Gosh, I should have added up how many of these I have done this fall. I kicked off this book club series a couple weeks after the book came out in September to give you quick interviews of dialogue with those featured in the book. If you haven't picked it up yet, Stylist, my publisher, has a discount for you that is good until just the end of this year. So jump to their website, stylistpublishing.com. And they also, I think, have free shipping in that discount. It's also on Amazon, but y'all don't get that discount there unless maybe you get some good gift cards for the holidays. You can apply the book there. Yeah, I want to thank you for joining me today, and any and all other ones that you have caught this fall. I appreciate you tuning in to catch some of them. And I do hope that you're able to take time for yourself, for your family, for whoever is valuable and meaningful to you. If that means it's your puppies, I'm going to do a bit of that too over the holiday break. And just share appreciation again that we can even have technology like this where I can live stream to 4 different places that connect with people around the globe. I'm feeling very appreciative of those technology tools used with purpose. So what I'm going to do for 2021, I am still strategizing. So if you have ideas, send them my way, but stay tuned as I think and vision what that's going to look like. So y'all take care. Happy holidays and Happy New Year.